Unlocking the power of feedback, rethinking feedback as a continuous learning process. What if one of the most powerful tools we have in education is also one of the most misunderstood? Take a moment to reflect on these questions. Do my students regularly read and act upon the feedback I provide? Do I design feedback with the explicit intentions, informing students' next piece of work? Do I explicitly revisit previous feedback with students to check how they have applied it? Does my institution's assessment structure support feedback as an ongoing, continuous process rather than a one-off event? Many educators often respond somewhere between on a balance agree and strongly agree. But when students are asked similar questions, the pattern often looks very different. Do I regularly read the feedback I receive and try to apply it to improve future work? Does the feedback I receive help me understand how to improve my next assignment? Do I revisit feedback from previous assignments to see how I can apply it in later work? Does the way assessments are structured in my program help me use feedback as part of an ongoing learning process? In higher education, especially, students often respond far more negatively. Many say they do not fully understand feedback, do not revisit it, and do not find it easy to use in future work. This points to what we might call the feedback perception gap. Research suggests that teachers often judge feedback by what they have given, while students judge feedback by what they have understood and used. Carless and Boud, 2018, argue that feedback is not successful simply because comments were written. It is only effective when learners can appreciate, interpret and use it productively. Winston and colleagues, 2017, similarly show that students often need support, explanation and opportunity if they are to act on feedback meaningfully. So why does feedback matter so much in the first place? Because, when done well, it can be transformational. The Education Endowment Foundation describes feedback as a high-impact, low-cost approach, associated with around 6 months additional progress in learning. In practical terms, this can represent a highly meaningful improvement in attainment. For example, a student achieving 55%, lower second-class level, 2-2, who makes substantial progress through effective use of feedback could potentially move into first-class territory over time. While outcomes will vary between learners and contexts, the message is clear. When feedback is designed and used effectively, its impact can be significant. Gibbs, 2010, also highlights feedback as one of the strongest influences on learning and achievement. Wiliam argues that effective feedback can clarify misconceptions, guide further learning, improve performance, and support motivation and engagement. In short, feedback matters because it helps learners understand where they are, where they need to go, and what to do next. So what is feedback? Feedback is information given to a learner about their performance in relation to learning goals or outcomes. It can be verbal, written, digital, given by peers, or generated through tests and quizzes. But its purpose is not simply to judge completed work. Its purpose is to redirect and refocus effort, helping learners move closer to the intended outcome. And yet, there is a paradox. Feedback is powerful, but more feedback is not always better. Kluger and Dennesy's meta-analysis of over 3,000 studies found that although feedback often improves performance, the effects were highly variable, and in 38% of cases, feedback interventions actually had a negative effect. That is a striking reminder that feedback does not automatically improve learning. If it is unclear, excessive, poorly timed, or disconnected from future work, it may do little, or even cause harm. Butler's classic study divided participants into 3 different feedback groups while teaching and learning conditions were kept broadly the same. The first group received grades only, throughout the program and made no measurable progress. The second group received comments only, at different stages of the program and made around 30% improvement. Most surprising of all, the third group received both grades and comments, yet also made no measurable progress, even though we might expect this combination to produce the strongest gains. Butler's findings suggest that once a grade is present, many learners focus on the mark rather than the message, meaning the developmental value of the comments can be lost. Why do students not always respond to feedback? Sometimes the issue is feedback literacy. Students may not know how to interpret comments, identify priorities, or apply feedback to future tasks. Sometimes the issue is emotion. Feedback can feel personal. If it feels overly critical, vague, abrupt or strongly tied to disappointing grades, students may disengage. Sometimes the issue is clarity. Phrases like, be more critical, or, develop your analysis, may seem clear to the tutor, but not to students. This is often linked to expert blind spot or the curse of knowledge, where subject specialists understand academic expectations so well that they can unintentionally assume those expectations are obvious to others. What feels clear and straightforward to an experienced tutor may remain vague, abstract, or difficult to translate into action for a learner. Feedback can be overly backwards-looking, explaining what was wrong in a completed piece of work but offering little guidance on what to do differently next time. When comments focus only on past mistakes, students may struggle to translate them into future improvement. Feedback may also arrive too late to be useful. Even high-quality comments can lose impact if they come after students have mentally moved on, started a new module, or submitted the next assignment. Timing matters because feedback is most powerful when learners still have an opportunity to act on it. In other cases, there is simply too much feedback. Long lists of corrections, annotations, and competing messages can overwhelm students, creating cognitive overload where they do not know what matters most or where to begin. Research into feedback has long provided valuable clarity on what effective practice looks like. Nicol and Macfarlane-Dick's 7 principles of effective feedback remind us that good feedback should clarify standards, support self-assessment, encourage dialogue, build motivation, provide next steps, help close the gap, and inform future teaching. These principles are widely respected and frequently cited. Yet in many real educational settings, they are not always fully realized in practice. Feedback can still become rushed, unclear, overly focused on grades, disconnected from future tasks, or lost within busy assessment systems. We often know what effective feedback looks like, but translating that knowledge into everyday practice remains a challenge. It was this challenge that led educational researcher Dr. Toko, 2025, to begin a journey to address the complexity of feedback and attempt to operationalize it in a practical, sustainable way. Drawing on research, professional experience, and consultation with experts in assessment and learning, he sought to synthesize the most effective elements of feedback into a model educators could realistically use. That process gave birth to the developmental priority model. At its heart, the model has 3 connected parts. 1. Developmental priorities, clear, focused next steps for improvement. 2. Dialogue, meaningful discussion that helps learners understand feedback. 3. Enactment, structured opportunities for learners to apply feedback in future work. 1. Developmental priorities. Traditional feedback often tries to say too much. Students may receive paragraphs of comments and still not know where to begin. Developmental priorities solve this by identifying no more than 3 high-value actions most likely to improve future performance. Crucially, these priorities are linked directly to the next assignment, module, or task. This may require consultation with the tutor delivering the next module, or at least a clear understanding of what students will be working on next. For example, if working with a business student, instead of saying, "be more critical," a developmental priority might say, "in your next marketing strategy report, when analyzing a selected company's social media campaign, include 1 paragraph that identifies 2 specific strengths of the strategy, 1 limitation, and 1 potential tension or risk, supported by relevant marketing theory or evidence." Clear, specific, forward-facing, actionable. This reduces overload, increases clarity, and helps students focus effort where it matters most. 2. Dialogue. Feedback should not end when comments are written. Students often misinterpret feedback, feel uncertain about expectations, or have an emotional reaction that prevents engagement. Dialogue helps address this. It supports the development of feedback literacy, learners' ability to understand, interpret, and use feedback productively. It also helps manage emotional responses by allowing reassurance, explanation, and encouragement. Importantly, dialogue does not have to mean one-to-one tutorials only. Dr. Toko has also worked with colleagues implementing the DPM successfully with large student cohorts where individual tutorials were not always feasible. Alternative approaches have included small group tutorials, larger feedback workshops, whole class or group discussion forums where students can post and ask questions, video memos followed by opportunities for clarification, or time deliberately built into lessons, such as the final 15 to 30 minutes, for feedback discussion and Q&A. The key principle is not the format itself, but creating genuine opportunities for exchange, clarification, and shared understanding. 3. Enactment. Perhaps the greatest weakness of many feedback systems is that students receive comments but are never required to use them. Enactment closes that gap. Students actively demonstrate how they have responded to previous feedback in future assignments, reflections, action plans, or developmental priority forms. Where possible, this should be documented. Having a visible record of priorities, actions taken, and progress reviewed over time makes the process more meaningful, more accountable, and easier to sustain. Feedback then becomes something students do, not something they simply receive. The DPM does not need to be implemented perfectly to make a meaningful difference. You do not need to apply every element in full from day one. Even small changes can have a significant impact on how students experience and use feedback. Think of a personal trainer advising a client to exercise for 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. If that is unrealistic, then 1 hour twice a week, or even 20 minutes on most days, can still lead to real progress. The same principle applies here. If you cannot do everything, begin with something. Adapt the model to your context, use what is realistic, and build gradually over time. Coming full circle, when the developmental priority model was used with learners who had experienced more traditional feedback systems, something powerful happened. When later asked questions about feedback on their program, whether it was clear, useful, future-focused, revisited, and supported ongoing improvement, students overwhelmingly selected strongly agree. That matters. Because the true success of feedback is not measured by how much tutors write. It is measured by whether learners understand it, use it, and grow because of it. The developmental priority model seeks to bring feedback back to what it was always meant to be: clear priorities, meaningful dialogue, purposeful action, and continuous improvement. That is where the power of feedback truly lies.